Human screams echoed through the hellish Iridian mines as cruel alien overseers cracked electro-whips, driving their captives to dig faster. But the invaders would soon learn the true cost of trying to enslave humanity. The human exploration vessel ESS Magellan had journeyed to the distant world of Radix Prime on a mission of discovery, but instead found only horror and subjugation. Approaching the planet, the human crew detected strange energy readings from beneath the barren surface. Before they could investigate further, a flotilla of angular alien warships emerged from hidden hangars surrounding the Magellan. Warning shots flashed across the bow as a guttural voice crackled over comms, ordering the humans to surrender or be destroyed. Outgunned and caught by surprise, Captain Elena Novak had no choice but to comply. As the human crew was marched down the boarding ramp at gunpoint, they got their first look at their captors, the Iridians. The gray, hairless aliens stood a head taller than the humans on double-jointed legs, their skeletal faces dominated by cold black eyes and trifurcated jaws lined with sharp fangs. Armed with plasma rifles and clad head to toe in scarlet battle armor, the Iridian soldiers prodded the humans into the bowels of the mines. There, Captain Novak and her crew joined hundreds of other human captives, abducted from far-flung colony worlds and forced into brutal slavery. From dawn to dusk, they toiled under the watchful eye of their Iridian masters, extracting the precious ore ergonium from the planet's crust. Ergonium, they soon learned, was the key to the aliens' advanced technology and galactic conquest. Powered by the rare mineral, the Iridians' plasma cannons, shields, and warp drives were centuries beyond anything the human fleet possessed. Examining the remnants of other species who had tried to resist, Alexander Warren, a grizzled space marine, realized the horrible truth. The Iridians were on a crusade to conquer the stars, enslaving or exterminating anyone in their path. Dozens of races had already fallen before the implacable Iridian juggernaut, and Earth would be next. Your species has an impressive grasp of warp mechanics for primitives, Mizar, the cruel Iridian overseer, sneered at Alexander as he labored in the mine. The ships you arrived in had quite innovative FTL drives. We're looking forward to incorporating your technologies into our own. After, of course, we travel to your homeworld and enslave the rest of your kind. The words burned in Alexander's mind as Mizar stalked away. Earth was undefended, unaware of the horror that would soon arrive on its doorstep. The Iridians would reverse engineer the human FTL drives, appear in the skies over Earth, and rain destruction on its cities until humanity submitted to slavery or faced extinction. Only Alexander and his fellow captives had a chance to stop it. But alone, outnumbered and outgunned, the human crew didn't stand a chance against the alien legions. Luckily for Earth, they weren't alone. As Alexander staggered back to the prisoner's communal cavern after another back-breaking shift, a clawed hand reached out and pulled him into the shadows. "I am Vorrox of the Aluxi," a voice rasped. "We were among the first the Iridians conquered. I have been in these mines for decades, as have others. We can help you fight them." And so a desperate plan was born. While Iridian guards watched for open rebellion, Alexander and his fellow slaves quietly organized, gathered info on the aliens' weaknesses from Vorrox and the others, and prepared to strike at the perfect moment, just as the Iridians moved to test their reverse-engineered human FTL drive for the first time, before they could bring the design back to their fleet and embark on the invasion of Earth. Everything hinged on the element of surprise, on seizing the human ship and escaping the planet before the Iridians could stop them. It was a nearly impossible task. The alien defenses were formidable, their numbers overwhelming. The human resistance could expect no reinforcements, no second chances. They would have to fight like hell and sacrifice everything for the slimmest chance of victory against the merciless Iridian horde. And if they failed, humanity would pay the price in eternal enslavement. The fate of Earth itself hung in the balance. In the communal cavern where the humans huddled during their brief respites from backbreaking labor, Alexander gathered his fellow slaves. Covered in grime and ergonium dust, they clustered around him, desperate for any glimmer of hope. "Listen up," Alexander said, his voice low and intense. The Iridians are about to crack the secret of human FTL technology. Once they do, they'll be on their way to Earth within days, and it's game over for the human race. Gasps and curses rippled through the assembled slaves. Alexander held up a hand for silence. But we have a chance to stop them. The Aluxi slave Voraks told me about a weakness in their defenses. We're going to exploit it and get the hell off this rock. Alexander outlined the plan, a two-pronged assault to neutralize the guards and hijack the human ship before the Iridians could finish reverse engineering the FTL drive. I'll lead a frontal attack on the guard post, Alexander said. That'll create a diversion. Meanwhile, Marcus will take a team to infiltrate the research facility, secure our ship, and grab any intel on the Iridians' invasion plans. Marcus, a former space marine like Alexander, nodded grimly. The humans exchanged determined looks, ready to risk everything for a chance at freedom and saving Earth. At the appointed hour, the Iridian overseer Zargox stalked into the mine to begin the work shift. Alexander strode up to him and pounded his fist into the alien's jaw. Zargox staggered back, eyes widening in shock. Then he lunged at Alexander with a roar, pincers slashing. The two titans collided in a brutal melee, human strength matched against alien technology. All around them, the human slaves burst into action, overwhelming the guards. They wielded improvised weapons forged in secret, plasma arc welders, industrial blades, salvaged Iridian blasters. Caught off guard, the Iridians fell back under the savage human assault. In the chaos, Marcus and his team slipped away, racing towards the research compound. They took advantage of the diversionary attack to infiltrate the facility, swiftly neutralizing the minimal security left behind. In the central control room, Marcus hacked into the system, disabling alarms and unlocking doors. "I'm in," he reported over the stolen comm. "Setting charges now to cover our escape." As Marcus and his team prepped their impounded ship, Alexander and Zargox battled furiously, trading blows that would pulverize concrete. Zargox's exosuit gave him a clear advantage, and he pummeled Alexander mercilessly. But Alexander refused to stay down. He fought back with inhuman ferocity, ignoring the blood streaming down his face. As Zargox reared back for a killing blow, Alexander spotted the suit's weak point Vurox had told him about. He drove his fist into the tiny gap in the armor over Zargox's throat. The alien convulsed as the suit's integrity was breached. Alexander pressed his attack, smashing Zargox to the ground and stomping on the exosuit's control module until the overseer lay still. Leaving the wreckage of the guard post behind, Alexander and his band of rebels raced to join Marcus. They piled into the waiting ship just as Iridian reinforcements flooded into the compound, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. The human ship blasted off, narrowly evading the Iridian fire. As they rocketed out of the atmosphere, Radix Prime receding behind them, Marcus decrypted the intel files he'd stolen. "Holy shit," he breathed, scanning the data. "The Iridians have a fleet of hundreds of warships ready to invade Earth, and we've got detailed files on all of it." "Then let's get this data back to the fleet," Alexander said. "The Iridians may be on our tail, but now we've got a fighting chance. If we can reach Earth in time, we can give humanity the intel it needs to mount a defense and stop these alien bastards. But if we fail..." He left the terrible possibility unspoken. Engaging their jury-rigged FTL drive, the human rebels hurtled into the cold depths of space, beginning the desperate race back to Earth with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The stolen Iridian ship lurched as another plasma bolt grazed its hull. Alexander gripped the unfamiliar controls, his squeezing hard with tension. "Shields at 30%, Marcus shouted from the sensor station. "We can't take much more of this." Alexander banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of fire from the pursuing Iridian cruisers. The ship's alien systems protested, alarms blaring throughout the cockpit. "Hold on!" Alexander yelled as he punched the thrusters to maximum. The G-forces slammed them back in their seats as they rocketed away from their pursuers. For days, this deadly game of cat and mouse continued across the stars. The humans pushed their stolen vessel to its limits, engaging in hit-and-run attacks when cornered. But the relentless Iridian pursuit force, led by the ruthless Commander Mizar, refused to give up the chase. During a brief lull between skirmishes, Alexander gathered his team around a holo display. "We need to find an edge," he said, pulling up the stolen Iridian data files. "There has to be something in here we can use." As they pored over the information, Marcus suddenly went pale. "Oh, shit," he breathed, bringing up a schematic. "Look at this." The holodisplay showed a massive warship overflowing with weapons. Its central cannon glowed with ominous energy. "That's a planet killer," one of the crew whispered in horror. Alexander nodded grimly. "And according to this, Mizar plans to lead it straight to Earth at the head of their invasion fleet." A heavy silence fell over the group as the full weight of the situation sank in. "We can't stop this alone," Alexander said finally. "We need allies." He pulled up star charts, cross-referencing them with information from Orcs and the Iridian databases. There, the Kalzari system. They've resisted Iridian occupation before. If we can convince them to join us... The stolen ship limped into the Kalzari system days later, its hull scored by plasma fire. As they approached the battered industrial world, Alexander opened a comm channel. "Kalzari leadership, this is Alexander Warren of Earth," he transmitted. "We come seeking alliance against our common enemy, the Iridians." For tense minutes, there was only static. Then a gravelly voice responded, "Prove you're not Iridian spies, humans. We have no reason to trust you." Alexander's reply was cut short as proximity alarms blared. A Iridian strike force had followed them into the system, opening fire on the human ship and Kalzari defenses alike. "Kalzari, we'll prove ourselves in battle!" Alexander shouted into the comm as he banked their ship towards the attacking Iridians. "Stand with us now!" What followed was a furious space battle above the Kalzari homeworld. Alexander and his crew fought with desperate courage, their stolen ship darting between lumbering Iridian cruisers. Kalzari fighters joined the fray, their pilots' skill evident as they harried the alien invaders. When the last Iridian ship fled the system, leaving behind only scattered debris, Alexander reopened the channel to the Kalzari leadership. This time, there was no hesitation in their response. "You've shown your worth, humans," the Kalzari leader growled approvingly. "Perhaps an alliance is possible after all." Over the next days, Alexander shared everything they'd learned about the Iridians' plans. In return, the Kalzari granted access to hidden caches of advanced weapons and ships, greatly bolstering the fledgling anti-Iridian alliance. But their victory was short-lived. As Alexander and the Kalzari leaders were discussing strategy, the sky lit up with the flash of dozens of ships dropping out of FTL. "Iridian battle fleet," a Kalzari sensor operator cried out. "They've found us!" Alexander rushed to the command center's viewport, his blood running cold at the sight of the massive fleet arrayed against them. At its center loomed a colossal vessel, Mizar's dreadnought. "We're outgunned," the Kalzari leader snarled. "What now, human?" Alexander's mind raced. They could stay and fight alongside their new allies, possibly buying time for other worlds to prepare, or they could flee, continuing their desperate race to reach Earth before Mizar's planet killer. With the fate of multiple worlds hanging in the balance, Alexander knew his next decision could determine the course of the war against the Iridians. He took a deep breath and turned to face the Kalzari leader. Alexander's eyes widened as the massive Iridian battle fleet dropped out of FTL, their ships blotting out the stars. He pounded his fist on the console. "Damn it, we're out of time." The Kalzari leader turned to him. "What's the plan, human?" Alexander's mind raced. They couldn't stay and fight. It'd be suicide. But running meant abandoning their new allies. He gritted his teeth and made the call. "We have to go now, but first we hit that dreadnought. Hard." He outlined a lightning-fast strike plan. The Kalzari ships formed up around Alexander's stolen vessel, powering up their weapons. "All ships on my mark," Alexander said into the comms. 3, 2, 1, now!" Their ragtag fleet surged forward, engines screaming. Caught off guard, the Iridian ships scrambled to respond. Alexander's vessel led the charge, weaving through plasma fire. "There!" he shouted, spotting a weak point in the dreadnought's hull. "Concentrate all fire!" Energy beams lanced out, pummeling the massive ship. Explosions blossomed along its weapons array. "We did it!" Marcus yelled. "Their main guns are down!" Alexander didn't hesitate. "All ships jump to FTL, now!" Space warped around them as they fled, but the Iridians gave chase. What followed was a frenzied battle through the void. Ships on both sides exploded into fireballs. A Iridian cruiser clipped Alexander's engines, sending them into a spin. "We're losing power," an engineer shouted. Alexander saw other vessels in similar straits. His heart sank as he realized their stolen Iridian ship, with all that precious intel, was gone. "Everyone still mobile, lock onto the Kalzari dreadnought," he ordered. "We're jumping in system." It was their only shot. Alexander watched the energy readouts spike as they piggybacked onto the dreadnought's powerful drive. Space twisted, and they vanished. They emerged in an unknown system. Derelict structures and ancient ruins drifted in orbit around lifeless planets. "Another civilization wiped out," the Kalzari leader growled. Alexander nodded grimly. "And we'll be next if we don't move fast." He scanned the battered fleet. "Set down on that moon. We need repairs." As crews worked frantically to patch hull breaches and jury-rig systems, Alexander pored over star charts. One route stood out, a swirling maelstrom of cosmic energy. "The Grax Nebula," he murmured. It was notoriously deadly, but it might be their only chance to lose the Iridians. He called the fleet officers together, laying out his plan. Protests immediately erupted. "It's suicide. We'll never make it through." Alexander silenced them with a raised hand. "Listen up. We go through the nebula, or we die here. There's no other choice." He turned to address the crews, his voice carrying across comms to every ship. "I know you're scared. I am too. But we've come too far to give up now. Earth is counting on us. Hell, the whole galaxy is. So we're going into that nebula, and we're coming out the other side. Together." A ragged cheer went up. Alexander allowed himself a small smile before issuing orders to move out. The nebula loomed before them, a chaotic swirl of cosmic fire. Alexander took a deep breath and plunged in. Immediately, alarms blared. Sensors went haywire as radiation bombarded their hulls. Gravimetric distortions threatened to tear the ships apart. "Hold together," Alexander muttered, wrestling with the controls. All around, vessels succumbed to the nebula's fury. A Kalzari frigate imploded. 2 human corvettes collided and exploded. Alexander's dreadnought shuddered as cosmic lightning danced across the hull. The viewport cracked, a spiderweb of fissures spreading. "We can't take much more of this," Marcus shouted over the din of failing systems. Alexander's eyes darted frantically over the instruments. There had to be a way out. Had to be. Then he saw it. A faint blue flicker on the sensors. "There!" he yelled. "All ships, make for that signature. It's a wormhole!" He poured every ounce of remaining power into the engines. The ships surged forward, racing for their last hope of survival. "Brace for transit," Alexander ordered as they plunged into the swirling vortex. They burst out the other side in a spray of cosmic energy. Alexander's hands flew over the controls, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of debris. As the sensors cleared, his jaw dropped. All around them floated the unmistakable signs of human activity. Mining rigs, research stations, comm buoys. "We made it," Marcus breathed. "We're home." But Alexander's elation was short-lived. Proximity alarms shrieked as new contacts appeared, Iridian warships emerging from the wormhole behind them. He gripped the command chair. They'd reached Earth, but the real fight was only beginning. The battered fleet burst out of the Grax Nebula, alarms blaring as systems struggled to cope with the aftermath of their perilous journey. Alexander's hands flew across the controls, stabilizing their trajectory as they entered the familiar expanse of Earth's solar system. "We made it," he breathed, relief washing over him. His reprieve was short-lived. The sensors lit up with new contacts, Human defense ships closing fast. Unidentified vessels, you have entered restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded. A stern voice crackled over the comms. Alexander punched in his emergency verification codes. This is Alexander Warren. We have critical intel on an imminent Iridian invasion. Patch me through to your commanding officer immediately. For tense moments, there was only static. Then a gruff voice came through. Warren? We thought you were dead. What's this about an invasion? Alexander's fingers danced across the console, transmitting the stolen Iridian data. It's all here, sir. Battle plans, ship schematics, weapons capabilities. They're coming with a dreadnought that can crack planets. If we don't act now, Earth is doomed. Silence stretched as the data was analyzed. Finally, the commander spoke, his tone tinged with doubt. This is a lot to take in, Warren. Are you sure? A new alarm cut him off. Alexander's eyes widened as he saw a Kalzari battlecruiser emerge from the nebula, its hull scarred and smoking. Behind it, emerging like demons from the cosmic maelstrom, came the vanguard of the Iridian fleet. Contact! Alexander shouted. Multiple Iridian warships incoming! The human defense grid erupted into action. Railguns spat hypervelocity rounds as energy weapons lanced out to meet the alien threat. The sky lit up with explosions as the battle was joined. Alexander took control of his ragtag fleet, barking orders. Form up on me! We're punching through their left flank! His ship surged forward, a motley assortment of human and alien vessels united against a common foe. Alexander's stolen Iridian cruiser led the charge, its weapons blazing. As the furious battle raged, Alexander's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned. A direct confrontation would be suicide. All ships, execute scattered jump protocol Epsilon, he ordered. We're going to divide their forces. Alexander's fleet split apart, each group jumping to a different sector of the solar system. The Iridian pursuit fractured, forced to chase multiple targets. On the bridge of his command ship, Alexander plotted a series of micro-jumps deeper into the system. Helm, prepare for rapid fire jumps. We're going to keep them guessing. His vessel blinked in and out of normal space, appearing just long enough to draw Iridian ships away from the main force before vanishing again. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse played out across the vastness of space. Sir, his tactical officer called out, we've got reinforcements incoming. Black Ops teams and Special Forces units. Alexander nodded grimly. Good, we're going to need them. Prepare for boarding action on the next jump. We're taking the fight to them. As they materialized near a Iridian supply ship, Alexander led the assault himself. Human Marines in cutting-edge powered armor stormed the alien vessel, their weapons modified with captured Iridian tech. The close-quarters combat was brutal and swift. Alexander fought his way to the bridge, securing vital intelligence on Iridian supply lines and communication protocols. Back on his ship, he coordinated with the newly arrived reinforcements. I want surgical strikes on every weak point we can find, disrupt their communications, sabotage their fuel lines, anything to slow them down. The guerrilla campaign intensified. Human strike teams hit Iridian ships with lightning raids, vanishing before the aliens could mount an effective response. Meanwhile, Alexander continued his strategic jumps, drawing more and more of the Iridian fleet away from Earth. As the hours stretched on, Alexander received a transmission from Earth Command. Warren, this is Admiral Chen. The combined human fleet is assembled and ready. Your delaying action has given us the time we needed. Alexander allowed himself a small smile. They had a fighting chance now. But as he looked at the tactical display, his blood ran cold. The massive form of Mizar's dreadnought was visible now, steadily advancing towards Earth. Alexander's eyes locked onto the massive form of Mizar's dreadnought, its colossal silhouette blotting out the stars. He clenched his fist, acutely aware that Earth's combined might stood little chance against such apocalyptic firepower. Admirals, generals, we need to talk, Alexander said, his voice tight with urgency. Now. Within minutes, the highest-ranking human military commanders gathered in the war room. Holograms flickered to life, displaying the stolen Iridian data Alexander had risked everything to obtain. "Look here," Alexander said, pointing to a schematic of the dreadnought. "Its main cannon. It needs time to charge." Admiral Chen leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "How long?" "Long enough," Alexander replied. "When it's charging, that beast is vulnerable. That's our window." The room erupted into a flurry of tactical discussions. Alexander listened intently, adding crucial details from his first-hand experience fighting the Iridians. "We hit them in stages," General Kovac said, outlining the plan on a 3D star map. "First, our stealth ships slipped past their lines, hit the support fleet hard and fast." Alexander nodded. "Good. That'll isolate the dreadnought and force it to start charging its main gun. Then we go all in," Admiral Chen added. "Every ship we've got, supported by the Kalzari. We punch through their lines and trap that monster in our kill zone." "There's more," Alexander said, pulling up another schematic. "We use captured Iridian infiltrators to insert Black Ops teams directly into the dreadnought's reactor core. If we can destabilize it—" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "It's risky as hell," General Kovac muttered. "It's our only shot," Alexander countered. He took a deep breath. "I'll lead the assault personally, and if all else fails, I'll ram the damn thing myself." Protests erupted, but Alexander silenced them with a raised hand. "We're out of options. This is it. The moment that decides the fate of Earth and every free world in the galaxy." He looked each commander in the eye. "I know what I'm asking. The cost will be high. But if we falter now, everything we fought for dies with us." Alexander's words hung in the air. Slowly, nods of agreement rippled through the room. "Then let's get to work," Admiral Chen said, her voice filled with unwavering perseverance. As the commanders dispersed to brief their forces, Alexander stepped to the view screen. Earth hung there, beautiful and fragile. He placed his hand against the cool glass. "We won't let you fall," he whispered. "Not today, not ever." With a deep breath, Alexander turned and strode from the room. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. Alexander's hands flew across the tactical display as he assessed the new threat. The Iridian Reserve Force materialized from FTL, their ships gleaming with malice in the harsh light of Earth's sun. "All ships, Titan formation," Alexander barked. "Concentrate fire on their lead vessels. We punch through or die trying." The Peregrine shuddered as its main guns unleashed a devastating salvo. Streaks of blue-white energy lanced out, striking a Iridian cruiser. The enemy ship's shields flared and collapsed, its hull buckling under the onslaught. But the Iridians gave as good as they got. A barrage of plasma torpedoes slammed into one of Alexander's frigates, shearing off its port nacelle. The crippled ship spun out of control, trailing debris and atmosphere. "Sir, we've got incoming," the tactical officer shouted. "Enemy flagship is moving to cut us off." Alexander's eyes narrowed as he studied the approaching vessel. It was a behemoth, easily twice the size of the Peregrine. Its hull bristled with weapon emplacements, each one capable of vaporizing a smaller ship. "That's Admiral Krotak," Alexander muttered. "Mizar's attack dog." He keyed the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, new orders. We're going to split their formation. Omega Group, peel off and engage their flanking elements. Delta Group, with me. We're taking that flagship head-on." The human fleet split apart, smaller vessels darting to harass the edges of the Iridian force, while Alexander led his heaviest ship straight at Krotak's command vessel. Space lit up with crisscrossing beams of energy and streams of missiles. The Peregrine rocked as a glancing hit breached its outer armor. Warning klaxons blared as damage reports flooded in. "Helm, evasive pattern Sierra," Alexander ordered. "Engineering, I need more power to the forward shields." The massive ship lurched, narrowly avoiding a salvo that would have gutted it. Alexander gripped his chair as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. "Sir, we're in range for a precision strike on their command bridge," the weapons officer reported. Alexander nodded grimly. "Do it." The Peregrine's spinal-mounted particle cannon powered up, its capacitors whining as they built to overload. A lance of pure destruction erupted from the bow, punching through the weakened shields of Krotak's flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a series of secondary explosions rippled along the Iridian vessel's hull. Its lights flickered and died as system after system failed. "Direct hit!" the tactical officer whooped. "Their command and control is offline." Alexander allowed himself a tight smile. "Press the advantage. All ships concentrate fire on that flagship. We're going to—" His words were cut off as a new alarm screamed for attention. The tactical display shifted, showing a massive energy surge from the crippled Iridian dreadnought. "Impossible," Alexander breathed. "They've managed to restart the main cannon." The horrifying realization sank in. They'd won the battle, but the war was nowhere near the end. The dreadnought's world killer was powering up, and Earth lay squarely in its sights. Alexander's eyes widened as the tactical display erupted with new contacts. A swarm of Iridian reinforcements materialized from FTL, their ships sleek and menacing against the backdrop of stars. At their head, a massive command ship filled with weaponry announced the arrival of Admiral Vizrak. "All ships, battle stations!" Alexander barked. "Vizrak's trying to box us in. Marcus, take Alpha Group and draw off their flanking elements. The rest of you, with me. We're punching straight for that dreadnought's weak spot." The human fleet split apart with practiced precision. Marcus's ships peeled away, engines flaring as they engaged in a series of lightning-fast strikes against Vizrak's outer formations. Alexander watched the tactical feed for a moment, noting with grim satisfaction as Marcus's group drew away a significant portion of the Iridian forces. "Helm, full power to engines," Alexander ordered. "Weapons, target that gash in the dreadnought's port side. Fire everything we've got." The Peregrine surged forward, its weapons blazing. Beams of coherent energy lashed out, striking the dreadnought's wounded flank. Armor plates buckled and peeled away, exposing more of the massive ship's internal structure. "Sir, we have an opening," the tactical officer shouted. Alexander nodded. "Launch the breaching pods. All ships provide covering fire." From the Peregrine's launch bays, a dozen specialized assault craft shot out, riding the wake of the flagship's weapons fire. Each pod carried a team of elite human commandos, their powered armor gleaming in the harsh light of weapons discharge. The pods slammed into the dreadnought's hull, latching on with magnetic grapples. Instantly, the commandos went to work. Molecular disassemblers hummed to life, carving paths through meters of alien alloys. Inside the dreadnought, alarms blared as the human strike teams poured in. Lieutenant Chen, leading the assault, barked orders to his squad. "Alpha team, secure this section. Beta, with me. We're headed for the bridge." The corridors of the massive ship became a war zone. Human commandos traded fire with Iridian defenders, their advanced weapons punching through alien armor. Chen's team fought their way deeper into the ship's bowels, guided by intel from the earlier infiltration. Outside, the space around the dreadnought lit up with weapons fire. Alexander's ships danced through the void, trading devastating blows with Vizrak's reinforcements. A Iridian cruiser exploded in a silent flash, only to be replaced by two more. On the Peregrine's bridge, Alexander gripped his command chair as the ship rocked from a near miss. "Status report." "Shields at 40%, sir," his XO replied. "We can't take much more of this." Alexander opened his mouth to respond when a brilliant beam of energy sliced through space, catching the Peregrine's forward shields. The ship lurched violently, systems flickering. "Direct hit," the damage control officer shouted. "Forward shields are down." Alexander's mind raced, searching for options. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. "Sir, unidentified ships emerging from Saturn's rings." Alexander's eyes narrowed as he recognized the energy signatures. "It's the Interdiction Fleet! They made it!" The stealth ships of Earth's long-range interdiction force swept in from their hiding spots, catching Vizrak's fleet in a devastating crossfire. Their advanced weapons tore through Iridian shields, buying Alexander's battered forces precious time. All ships regroup and fall back, Alexander ordered. Let's give our boarding teams the time they need. Aboard the dreadnought, Chen's team finally reached the ship's command center. They breached the armored doors in a hail of gunfire and grenades, storming into a scene of chaos. Mizar, the Iridian commander, stood surrounded by his elite guards. For a moment, the two sides faced each other in a tense standoff. Then all hell broke loose. Human commandos and Iridian warriors clashed in brutal close-quarters combat. Energy weapons discharged at point-blank range, and the air filled with the smell of ozone and burning flesh. Chen ducked under a Iridian energy blade, his armor scorched but intact. He brought his rifle up, firing a burst that dropped two alien guards. All around him, his team pressed the attack, slowly pushing back the Iridian defenders. Finally, after what felt like hours of combat, Chen stood over a disarmed Mizar. The Iridian commander glared up at him with alien eyes full of hatred. "It's over," Chen said. "You're coming with us." As the human forces secured their prize and downloaded the ship's databanks, Alexander coordinated the withdrawal. The battered human fleet disengaged under covering fire, leaving the crippled dreadnought adrift as they jumped to safety. Hours later, in the relative calm of their rallying point, Alexander stood before the captured Mizar. But his moment of triumph was short-lived as he processed the data from the Iridian archives. His blood ran cold as he realized the true scale of the threat they faced. The invasion force they had just defeated was merely the first wave. A vast armada of Iridian ships was en route, dwarfing anything they had faced so far. Alexander's fists clenched as the weight of this knowledge settled on his shoulders. The battle for Earth's survival had only just begun. Alexander stared at the holographic display, his eyes scanning the vast array of red dots representing the incoming Iridian armada. The sheer scale of the threat made his stomach churn. Thousands of warships, dozens of dreadnoughts, each one a city-sized engine of destruction. He turned to face the assembled commanders in the war room. Marcus stood to his right, arms crossed, while the Kalzari representatives hovered near the back, their alien features unreadable. "Gentlemen," Alexander began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "what you're looking at is the main Iridian invasion force. Our previous engagements were just the opening skirmishes." He tapped a control, and the display zoomed in on Earth. "Even with every ship we can muster, even if we strip our colonies bare, we don't have the numbers to stop this." A murmur of disquiet rippled through the room. Alexander held up a hand, silencing them. "But we're not beaten yet. Our cyber warfare teams have uncovered a vulnerability in the Iridian fleet coordination systems. We have a narrow window to strike as they emerge from FTL." Alexander outlined the plan, watching as expressions of disbelief gave way to cautious hope. When he finished, Marcus stepped forward. "It's insane," the grizzled commander said, "but it just might work. What do you need from us?" "Everything," Alexander replied. "Every ship that can fight, every soldier who can hold a gun. We're going all in." The next hours were a flurry of activity. Alexander strode through the captured Iridian dreadnought, now repurposed as the flagship of humanity's desperate counterattack. Technicians swarmed over alien consoles, integrating human systems and preparing the cyber warfare package that would be their primary weapon. In the cavernous hangar bay, Alexander paused to watch as a squadron of fighters was prepped for launch. The pilot snapped to attention as he approached. "At ease," he said. "You know what we're up against. The odds are long, but every ship we take out is one less threat to Earth. Fight smart, fight dirty, and come back alive. That's an order." As he turned to leave, one of the pilots called out, "Sir, we won't let you down! For Earth!" The cry was taken up by the others. "For Earth!" Alexander nodded, allowing himself a small smile before heading to the bridge. As he settled into the command chair, status reports flooded in. The fleet was as ready as it would ever be. "All ships reporting ready, sir," his XO announced. Alexander took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would decide the fate of humanity. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare for FTL jump." The massive engines of the dreadnought hummed to life, joined by hundreds of other vessels. Alexander felt the familiar lurch as space itself bent around them. Jump in 3, 2, 1. In a flash of light, the human fleet vanished from Earth orbit, hurtling towards their rendezvous with destiny. As the stars streaked by outside, Alexander gripped the arms of his chair. "Hold on, Earth," he whispered. "We're coming for you, Iridians, and this time we're bringing hell with us." The human fleet emerged from FTL in a brilliant flash, immediately greeted by the vast looming presence of the Iridian Armada. Alexander's eyes widened at the sight. Even the stolen intelligence hadn't prepared him for the sheer scale of the invasion force. "Status report," he barked. "Iridian fleet still in post-jump disarray, sir," his tactical officer responded. "We have a window of approximately 3 minutes before they can organize a coherent defense." Alexander nodded. "Initiate cyber warfare protocols. All ships prepare to execute attack pattern Omega on my mark." Invisible streams of data poured from the captured dreadnought, worming their way into the Iridian command and control systems. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then chaos erupted across the enemy fleet. Massive capital ships suddenly veered off course, their engines firing at random. Entire squadrons of fighters found themselves jumping to empty sectors of space. Iridian communications dissolved into a cacophony of contradictory orders and panicked reports. "Now," Alexander shouted, "all ships engage!" The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Caught off guard and in disarray, the Iridian vanguard crumbled under the assault. Alexander watched as a Iridian cruiser, its systems compromised, collided with one of its own escorts in a spectacular explosion. "Sir, Kalzari raiding groups report successful strikes on enemy supply lines," his communications officer announced. Alexander allowed himself a grim smile. "Excellent. Keep the pressure on. We need to—" His words were cut off as the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared as damage reports flooded in. "What was that?" Alexander demanded. "Sir, a group of Iridian dreadnoughts have broken through our cyber attack," the tactical officer reported. "They're rallying the fleet." Alexander's mind raced. They'd bloodied the Iridian nose, but the real fight was just beginning. He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Warren. The enemy is regrouping. Prepare for Phase 2. Remember, hit hard and fade away. We're here to bleed them, not stand and die. For Earth." As the battle raged around them, Alexander steeled himself for the long, grueling campaign ahead. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he. The strike force materialized in a burst of crackling energy, emerging from slipstream transit into the calculated interdiction zone. Alexander's eyes swept across the tactical display, taking in the chaotic scene before him. "Initiate cyber attack protocols," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension thrumming through the bridge. Fingers flew across consoles as the captured command codes from Mizar were transmitted. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, all hell broke loose. Massive Iridian flagships spun wildly, their navigation systems spewing nonsensical data. Some vanished in ill-advised jumps while others simply drifted, engines sputtering and dying. The once cohesive armada fractured into disorganized clusters. "All squadrons, engage at will," Alexander commanded. "Hit them hard and fast." Human gunships and bombers streaked across the void, weapons blazing. They darted between the lumbering Iridian capital ships, exploiting gaps in their defenses. Explosions blossomed silently in space as precise strikes crippled vital systems. A nearby display flickered, showing the Kalzari forces led by Grentak surging forward. Alexander allowed himself a moment of pride at their allies' bravery. That pride turned to ash in his mouth as a tightly grouped Iridian battle group tore through Grentak's ships. "Grentak's down!" his tactical officer shouted. "We've lost the entire Kalzari wing." Alexander's heart made. "Redirect reinforcements to stabilize that flank. We push on." He turned his attention to the largest concentration of enemy ships. "Helm, set course for the heart of that fracture. Weapons, prepare for full barrage. The Peregrine surged forward, its massive guns thundering. Iridian transports crumpled under the onslaught, while their escort cruisers struggled to form a defensive line. "Sir," his XO warned, "we're taking heavy fire. Shields at 60% and dropping." Alexander's eyes narrowed as he studied the looming form of Iridian dreadnought. "Helm, full speed ahead. We're going to ram that bastard." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances, but carried out his orders without hesitation. The Peregrine's engines roared as it accelerated towards the enemy vessel. Impact alarms blared as the two Titans collided. Metal screamed and tore as the Peregrine's armored prow carved into the dreadnought's superstructure. "Boarding teams, deploy!" Alexander shouted, already moving towards the airlock. He donned his combat armor, checking the seals as his elite squad assembled around him. They stormed through the breach, pushing deeper into the Iridian ship, the air filled with weapons fire and the screams of the dying. Alexander's troops fought valiantly, but the cost was high. For every meter gained, they left a trail of human bodies. "There!" Alexander pointed to a heavily guarded chamber. "That's the data core. Push through!" With a final, desperate assault, they breached the room. Alexander personally downloaded the critical archives as his dwindling squad held off waves of Iridian counterattacks. "Fall back," he ordered as the last bit of data transferred. "Back to the Peregrine." They retreated through blood-slicked corridors, barely making it back to their ship before the Iridian forces overwhelmed them. As they disengaged, Alexander's eyes widened at the damage reports scrolling across his display. "Reactors are critical," his chief engineer reported. "We need to evacuate now, sir." Alexander nodded grimly. "Begin evacuation procedures, and get me a secure link to the Kalzari raiders. I have a new mission for them." As escape pods jettisoned from the dying Peregrine, Alexander transmitted the coordinates of the Iridian supply convoy to the Kalzari. A small victory, but one that might prove crucial in the long run. The tide of battle shifted as the Iridian fleet began to recover from the initial cyber attack. Their scattered ships coalesced into formidable battle groups, their combined firepower overwhelming Alexander's hit-and-run tactics. "All ships initiate phased withdrawal," Alexander ordered from his new command post. "Form up into interdictor spheres. We're getting out of here." The remnants of the human fleet pulled back, each jump leaving more shattered hulks in their wake. Alexander watched with a heavy heart as Mizar's captured dreadnought was abandoned, its sacrifice buying precious time for the retreat. Hours later, as the battered survivors limped into Saul's defensive perimeter, the true cost became clear. Of the proud strike force that had set out, barely a quarter remained. Alexander stood in the hospital wing, surrounded by the moans of the wounded and dying. A junior officer approached, datapad in hand. "Sir, the latest projections on the Iridian advance." Alexander took the pad, his face grim as he absorbed the information. Despite their losses, the Iridians were regrouping, and this time they would be led by their most ruthless commanders. "Summon my advisors," he said quietly. "We need to decide humanity's next move." As the impromptu war council assembled, Alexander laid out their options. Grim faces stared back at him as he outlined the choice between flight and a final stand. The doors hissed open, admitting a figure Alexander hadn't expected to see again. Orcs, his old mentor, limped into the room. The battle-scarred elder's eyes held a weight that made Alexander's blood run cold. "I bring grave news," Orcs began, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.